Remember my friend, the jewelry store owner? Although she benefited by accident the first time, it did not take her long to begin exploiting the expensive is equals to good stereotype regularly and intentionally. Now, during the tourist season, she first tries to speed the sale of an item that has been difficult to move by increasing its price substantially. She claims that this is marvelously cost effective when it works on the unsuspecting vacationers, as it frequently does. It results in an enormous profit margin. And even when it is not initially successful, she can mark the article reduced from this and sell it to at its original price while still taking advantage of the expensive is equals to good reaction to the inflated figure. By no means is my friend original in this last use of expensive is equals to good rule to snare those seeking a bargain. Culturist and author Leo Roston gives the example of the Brubeck brothers, Sid and Harry, who owned a men's tailor shop in Roston's neighborhood while he was growing up in the 1930s. Whenever the salesman Sid had a new customer trying on suits in front of the shop's three-sided mirror, he would admit to a hearing problem, and as they talked, he would repeatedly request that the man speak more loudly to him. Once, the customer had found a suit he liked and asked for the prices. Sid would call to his brother, the head tailor at the back of the room. "Harry, how much for this suit?" Looking up from his work and greatly exaggerating the suit's true price, Harry would call back, "For that beautiful all-wool suit, $42. Pretending not to have heard and cupping his hands to his ear, Sid would ask again. Once more Harry would reply, $42. At this point, Sid would turn to the customer and report, "He says $22. Many a man would hurry to buy the suit and scramble out of the shop with this expensive is equal to good bargain before poor Sid discovered the mistake. There are several components shared by most of the weapons of automatic influence to be described in this book. We have already discussed two of them. The nearly mechanical process by which the power within these weapons can be activated, and the consequent exploitability of this power by anyone who knows how to trigger them. A third component involves the way that the weapons of automatic influence lend their force to those who use them. It's not that the weapons, like a set of heavy clubs, provide a conspicuous arsenal to be used by one person to bludgeon another into submission. The process is much more sophisticated and subtle. With proper execution, the exploiters need hardly strain a muscle to get their way. All that is required is to trigger the great stores of influence that already exist in the situation and direct them toward the intended target. In this sense, the approach is not unlike that of the Japanese martial art form called Jujutsu. A woman employing Jujutsu would utilize her own strength only minimally against an opponent. Instead, she would exploit the power inherent in such naturally present principles as gravity, leverage, momentum, and inertia. If she knows how and where to engage the action of these principles, she can easily defeat a physically stronger rival. And so it is for the exploiters of the weapons of automatic influence that exist naturally around us. The exploiters can commission the power of these weapons for use against their targets while exerting little personal force. This last feature of the process allows the exploiters an enormous additional benefit: the ability to manipulate without the appearance of manipulation. Even the victims themselves tend to see their compliance as determined by the action of natural forces rather than by the designs of the person who profits from that compliance. An example is in order. There is a principle in human perception, the contrast principle, that affects the way we see the difference between two things that are presented one after another. Simply put, if the second item is fairly different from the first, we will tend to see it as more different than it actually is. So, if we lift a light object first and then lift a heavy object, we will estimate the second object to be heavier than if we had lifted it without first trying the light one. The contrast principle is well established in the field of psychophysics and applies to all sorts of perceptions besides weight. If we are talking to a beautiful woman at a cocktail party and are then joined by an unattractive one, the second woman will strike us as less attractive than she actually is. In fact, studies done on the contrast principle at Arizona State and Montana State universities suggest that we may be less satisfied with the physical attractiveness of our own lovers because of the way the popular media bombard us with examples of unrealistically attractive models. In one study, college students rated a picture of an average-looking member of the opposite sex as less attractive if they had first looked through the ads in some popular magazine. In another study, male college dormitory residents rated the photo of a potential blind date. Those who did so while watching an episode of Charlie's Angels TV series viewed the blind date as a less attractive woman than those who rated her while watching a different show. Apparently, it was the uncommon beauty of the Angels' female stars that made the blind dates seem less attractive. A nice demonstration of perceptual contrast is sometimes employed in psychophysics laboratories to introduce students to the principle firsthand. Each student takes a turn sitting in front of 3 pails of water, one cold, one at room temperature, and one hot. After placing one hand in the cold water and one in the hot water, the student is told to place both in the lukewarm water simultaneously. The look of amused bewilderment that immediately registers tells the story. Even though both hands are in the same bucket, the hand that has been in the cold water feels as if it is now in hot water, while the other one that was in the hot water feels as if it is now in cold water. The point is that the same thing, in this instance, room temperature water, can be made to seem very different depending on the nature of the event that precedes it. Be assured that the nice little weapon of influence provided by the contrast principle does not go unexploited. The great advantage of this principle is not only that it works, but also that it is virtually undetectable. Those who employ it can cash in on its influence without any appearance of having structured the situation in their favor. Retail clothiers are a good example. Suppose a man enters a fashionable men's store and says that he wants to buy a 3-piece suit and a sweater. If you were the salesperson, which would you show him first to make him likely to spend the most money? Clothing stores instruct their sales personnel to sell the costly item first. Common sense might suggest the reverse. If a man has just spent a lot of money to purchase a suit, he may be reluctant to spend very much more on the purchase of a sweater. But the clothiers know better. They behave in accordance with what the contrast principle would suggest. Sell the suit first, because when it comes time to look at sweaters, even expensive ones, their prices will not seem as high in comparison. A man might balk at the idea of spending $95 for a sweater, but if he has just bought a $495 suit, a $95 sweater does not seem excessive. The same principle applies to a man who wishes to buy the accessories, shirt, shoes, belt to go along with his new suit. Contrary to the common sense view, the evidence supports the contrast principle prediction. As sales motivation analysts Whitney, Hubin, and Murphy state, the interesting thing is that even when a man enters a clothing store with the express purpose of purchasing a suit, he will almost always pay more for whatever accessories he buys if he buys them after the suit purchase than before. It is much more profitable for a salesperson to present the expensive item first, not only because to fail to do so will lose the influence of the contrast principle, to fail to do so will also cause the principle to work actively against them. Presenting an inexpensive product first and following it with an expensive one will cause the expensive item to seem even more costly as a result. Hardly a desirable consequence for most sales organizations. So, just as it is possible to make the same bucket of water appear to be hotter or colder depending on the temperature of previously presented water, it is possible to make the price of the same item seem higher or lower depending on the price of previously presented items. Clever use of perceptual contrast is by no means confined to clothiers. I came across a technique that engaged the contrast principle while I was investigating undercover the compliance tactics of real estate companies. To learn the ropes, I was accompanying a company realty salesman on a weekend of showing houses to prospective home buyers. The salesman, we can call him Phil, was to give me tips to help me through my break-in period. One thing I quickly noticed was that whatever Phil began showing a new set of customers potential buyer, he would start with a couple of undesirable houses. I asked him about it and he laughed. They were what he called setup properties. The company maintained a rundown house or two on its list at inflated prices. These houses were not intended to be sold to customers but to be shown to them so that the genuine properties in the company's inventory would benefit from the comparison. Not all the sales staff made use of the setup houses, but Phil did. He said he liked to watch his prospects' eyes light up when he showed the place he really wanted to sell them after they had seen the rundown houses. The house I got them spotted for looks really great after they have first looked at a couple of dumps. Automobile dealers use the contrast principle by waiting until the price for a new car has been negotiated before suggesting one option after another that might be added. In the wake of a $15,000 deal, the $100 or so required for a nice tea like an FM radio seems almost trivial in comparison. The same will be true of the added expense of accessories like tinted windows, dual side view mirrors, white wall tires, or special trim that the salesman might suggest in sequence. The trick is to bring up the extra independently of one another so that each small price will seem petty when compared to the already determined much larger one. As the veteran car buyer can attest, many a budget-sized final price figure has ballooned from the addition of all those seemingly little options. While the customer stands, signed contract in hand, wondering what happened and finding no one to blame but himself, the car dealer stands smiling, the knowing smile of the Jujutsu master.